Thanks for tuning in to this video. This is an update on the latest El Nino conditions and the updated outlook for the winter 2016. Today's date is December 18th, 2015. We hope you enjoy this video. When we look at El Nino, it's important to remember that El Nino does not equal rain, nor is El Nino a specific storm. What El Nino is very warm ocean temperatures in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. Those warm, unusually warm sea surface temperatures literally change the jet stream pattern. They draw it southward towards Southern California instead of being anchored across the Pacific Northwest like we've seen so far this year. Then it moves across Texas and Florida. So for those reasons, El Nino is a series of storms or a few months of a changed weather pattern that the cumulative impact brings a lot of rain and increased precipitation across our region, but definitely not one event or one storm. How does El Nino work? Well, in the Western Pacific, that's where a lot and most of the warm water typically is located. That's also where super typhoons form, moving across that deep, warm water. What keeps that warm water there is the normal circulation or the trade winds that go along the equator, as shown here. Now, that warm water, when too much of it builds up, you get too much weather in that area, and it literally can overwhelm the normal easterly trade winds, as shown here. That allows the water to spill eastward across the equator, hit South America, and spread out. Now, it seems so far away from our region, but that warm water, the size of the United States, can have a big impact on the weather patterns, especially during the winter months. It's not all about rain, though. Some parts of the United States can be very dry, such as the Ohio Valley. Other parts can be very mild, like the Northeast and the Northern Plains. But for us, the El Nino phenomena, what it does is it changes the path of our jet stream, at least for the course of one winter, allowing us to get more storms during the winter, especially between January and March. Here's a look at El Nino conditions across the Pacific Ocean. This is a satellite imagery taken of the Pacific Ocean, and what it does is it compares 30-year normal averages of sea surface temperatures. You can see the water along the California coast remains above normal and very much above normal along the Baja region. All that warm water that you see in the eastern Pacific also can help fuel some of the storms that move across our region. In other words, more warmth in the water allows for heavier rainfall rates and a little bit stronger storms as they move across it. All weather likes warm conditions underneath it. And the El Nino area at the bottom of the screen, well, that's the area that changes our actual weather pattern that'll bring those storms across the Pacific and into California. Right now, those conditions are very intense in terms of warm tropical waters. What typically happens is we see the jet stream every year drop southward in November and December. And you can see that in these years that are listed here, these are all strong El Nino years, such as 97, 98, 82, 83, 72, 73. These are the strong years, and the area shaded in blue or green, those are the areas that were wet during those strong El Nino years. You can see the Pacific Northwest was quite wet in December, January of most of the El Nino years. For us in Southern California, it's most important to note that the change typically occurs later in the winter, so between January and February all the way into March and in some cases April. Those are the years where very wet condition during strong El Nino is most evident across California, specifically Southern California, and some of the wettest months we've seen ever were February and March during those strong El Nino years. Here's a look at what the current conditions are in the El Nino area. And we are looking at a historic El Nino, at least when it comes to how warm the sea surface temperatures have been over the past month or 4 weeks. The region shown here is the very warm ocean temperatures that have been exceeding 3 degrees Celsius or about 5.5 Fahrenheit in that region. This region here is where we monitor El Nino along the equatorial Pacific Ocean. Not only is it a large area and a wide area, it's deep into the ocean. So we see a lot of warmth deep down in the Pacific Ocean. How strong is the current El Nino? Well, when we measure the heart of El Nino along the equatorial Pacific Ocean, that region has been around 3 degrees Celsius over the past 4 weeks. El Nino may have peaked, but we expect it to continue around that level. This level, or this magnitude of temperature, exceeds what we saw in 97, 98, and certainly exceeds what we saw in 82, 83. Two of the most comparable El Nino years. In those El Nino years, we saw the majority of our precipitation between January and March, and significant rains continued into the first part of April as well. You can see El Nino's only been around since April and May, and then really took off over the summer, and then peaked out recently at about 3.1 Celsius, the highest value ever recorded for the heart of El Nino. We use a lot of computer model projections as well, and here's an example. These are run every single day, and those help us with our long-term predictions, say a month out. These predictions here are for January 2016. Most of the simulations show the blue or green over California, which indicates above average rainfall for January. They also show that for Texas and Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico as well. So basically what we're seeing here is these long-term predictions, which are updated every day, are indicating more likely a wet scenario for January coming up. The Climate Prediction Center updates every month the seasonal outlook for precipitation and temperature. Here's the most recent forecast, and there's really not much change to it. The expectations are that the area that most likely will exceed its normal precipitation or have above normal precipitation is Southern California into Texas and parts of Florida. Some good news here is that the record-breaking temperatures that we've seen in 2015 will be put in check for Southern California due to the cloud cover and increased rainfall and eventually the saturated soil conditions. The bad news is with El Nino you tend to see a series of storms or some very wet periods. You don't necessarily see record-breaking 100-year storms or your biggest rain event of all time, but you do see a lot of storms, and if those storms pile up on each other in January, in February, or even in March, that can bring a significant impact, and that's what we've seen in the past with strong El Ninos. Also note the northern part of the country is expected to start drying out and also be much above normal for temperature. So there's a lot of confidence that warmer than normal conditions are going to occur across the northern tier because of the lack of cold air intrusions, or Arctic outbreaks we call them. Here's a zoomed up version from January through March. You can see the most confidence for above normal rainfall. So depending where you live, you might average 10 inches or you may average 25 inches of rain. But the most confidence for above normal precipitation, so between 100% of normal or 150% or 1.5 times what you normally get, that confidence is not only on the coast but our mountains and all the way into our desert region of the desert Southwest, and that area shaded in green. So with El Nino, you can have widespread impact. It's not about an isolated flood event or isolated heavy rain like we see in the summer and have seen this past summer, but it's about a more widespread rain and repeated rains over the same areas. If those storms pile up on each other and there's little break in between, you can have your most impact. Here's a summary of some of the things we talked about. El Nino is definitely here. El Nino occurs every several years, and El Nino is a condition that is normal in the ocean, but this current El Nino is at a magnitude we haven't seen before. Now with El Nino, we expect above normal precipitation in Southern California, that's the result of frequent storms across our region, not one particular storm. We can still get big Santa Ana wind events too, any time of the year, so keep that in mind. But typically when we get these very wet conditions, that helps with our fire weather and limits the potential for fire spreading. Big snowpack is what we need. We're starting to see a normal snowpack in California finally this year after 4 years of record drought and record low snowpack. But we have a long ways to go towards getting out of this current severe drought. So El Nino is definitely here. We have yet to see a series of storms. When we start seeing a series of storms, we'll know that the impacts of the atmosphere are being felt by those warm tropical waters. Note that the very mild conditions in the Northeast, those are definitely a sign of influence from the Pacific Ocean and from El Nino. El Nino doesn't guarantee anything, but historically, we've seen big impact from many storms occurring in the heart of our winter and all the way into our spring. Here is a list of some impacts and actions that you can do to help prepare for this upcoming El Nino. And you can also see if your region is in a floodplain using the link provided here. It's been a long time since most of us have seen significant rainfall. And finally, I'll leave you with some links to find information about digitalweather.gov, mobileweather.gov for your phone. You can find maps at digitalweather.gov that show how much rain is going to occur, how much snow, how much wind. You can monitor every weather station that we have available on the link provided. If you like these updates, you can get them weekly from the Climate Prediction Center, which is part of NOAA. All you really need to remember is weather.gov/San Diego. And that's when you can get updated latest information when it comes to particular individual storms and impacts that are expected in our region. Thanks for tuning in.